Spider-Man the movie for any console can best be described as two different games. One game that has really good outdoor levels that are a lot of fun, and one that has indoor levels that are plagued by a host of problems, which includes sort of bad camera angles and generally twitchy controls. The fact that Spider-Man the movie is actually based on the movie is sort of its downfall. I mean, the game has really great outdoor levels, and you would think that if the development team had a little more freedom, that they would be able to focus on the better parts of the game, which are the outdoor levels, as opposed to the indoor levels, which are really sort of not as fun. There's a lot of problems with them, but they have to stick with that because that's what was in the movie. The game is actually really similar to the previous Spider-Man games that have appeared on the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. The control scheme is really similar, although now they added an enhanced feature which basically gives you a web mod button instead of having to press like up, down, left, or right, and then the web slinging key. So it's actually easier to control the webbing at certain points. Though most people will probably just decide to stick with the original control scheme because it still works really well within the realm of the Spider-Man the movie. Spider-Man basically has all the same moves that he had in the previous games. He can do the web slinging, he can do zip lines, he can tie up criminals, he can shoot web balls at them, he can hang from the ceiling and drag guys up. But the major difference between Spider-Man the movie and previous games is that as you go through the game, you'll find new combinations that Spider-Man can use when he's attacking enemies hand-to-hand. One of the earliest combinations you'll find is the handspring, and that basically if you press like the kick button twice and then the punch button, Spider-Man will jump backwards and then leap forwards and do a kick, which is really useful for taking out groups of enemies. So throughout the game you'll see these little yellow Spider-Man icons, and you pick these up, you'll get new combinations, and there's dozens of combinations you can find throughout the game, and then some are more well hidden than others, but you'll get rewarded in the end if you try and look for them. The gameplay is actually a mixture of just your basic beat 'em up as well as some puzzle solving and just finding items. In most of the early levels you just basically be going through each level and fighting criminals. In later levels you'll have to disarm bombs, you'll have to rescue hostages. In one level, the museum, you have to rescue police officers before they get beat up by the criminals there. There's also a lot of item finding missions, but you'll find that most of it's just pretty straightforward action gaming. There's not a whole lot of variety, but at the same time there really doesn't need to be, especially in the outdoor levels. But there really aren't any huge spoilers in the game, so if you play the game before going out to see the movie, yeah, you'll get a few of the scenes from the movie, but if you've been a devout fan of the Spider-Man comic book, you'll still know key moments that happen. You'll already know what they're about. The enemy AI in the game is really sort of mixed. Most of the criminals are pretty dumb. I mean, they'll just run into walls and kind of just stay in position. They'll dance around if you go up on the ceiling, and they won't really know what to do. But there are some times where just the regular criminals do some pretty cool things, like if you jump on their backs, eventually they'll just start running around and they'll run into a wall to get you off their back. But basically they're pretty dumb, and they just run towards you and start punching or shooting, and you'll be able to take care of them pretty quick. The boss characters, on the other hand, are actually really surprising. Some of the later bosses in the games will actually learn your combinations, so if you keep using the same combination over and over again, the boss will counter it every single time. So it sort of forces you to learn these new combinations that you find throughout each level to mix up the way you're fighting so that you can't just use regular punches and kicks over and over again. The CG cutscenes in the game are modeled after the movie, so you can expect to see the same sort of dramatic camera angles of Spider-Man swinging through the air, rescuing hostages, and all that sort of thing. In addition to the nicer looking graphics, the Xbox version also has an additional level where you fight Kraven the Hunter inside of a museum. Although it's cool to kind of play through this level because it's a little bit different than what you're traditionally playing through in the rest of the game. It's really short, and it's actually probably one of the easiest levels in the game, so it really doesn't add all that much to the overall experience. Even though they had Tobey Maguire do the voice for Spider-Man in the actual game, the voice work is sort of questionable. It's not horrible, but you can tell that some of the voice actors just really aren't into what they're doing, and it's just sort of flat, and it doesn't really add all that much to the game. Especially some of the one-liners that Tobey has when he's talking to the game bosses or just the criminals. They really fall sort of flat, and they're not typical Spider-Man pizzazz kind of energy, which is sort of disappointing. Most of the music in the game is really subdued, and some of the tracks are really short, so you'll hear the same thing looped over and over again. But in general, the tracks that you do hear, they're pretty good. They give you kind of an epic feeling that you're actually sort of playing through a game version of the movie. Overall, most people should have quite a bit of fun playing through the game, though the indoor levels will certainly give you some frustration. There's a lot of problems with the camera and some of the controls, but you'll be able to look past this because the outdoor levels are a lot of fun to play through. But if you're kind of concerned with the problems with the indoor levels, then you should definitely rent it first.